I've been driving trucks for years, covering long stretches of remote highways across the country. But there's one road I'll never forget, a stretch of forgotten highway that nearly drove me insane. It was a rainy night, and I was on a late-night haul through a part of the Midwest I didn't recognize. I'd taken a detour after an accident blocked the main highway. The GPS was glitching, and I was relying mostly on old maps and street signs. The rain hammered against my windshield, the wipers struggling to keep up. I gripped the wheel tighter, focusing on the narrow, winding road ahead. Nothing around for miles except for trees and the occasional rundown barn. The road was eerily empty. No headlights in my rearview mirror, no taillights ahead. Just me, the truck, and the endless rain-soaked asphalt. I told myself it was just another desolate stretch of backroad America. But as the miles dragged on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The first sign of trouble came when I realized how long I'd been driving without seeing an exit. No gas stations, no rest stops, no signs pointing to the next town. Just mile after mile of wet road bordered by dense forest. I checked the clock on the dashboard. Midnight had come and gone, and my fuel gauge was starting to dip lower than I'd like. I needed to find somewhere to stop soon. That's when I saw it. A figure standing in the middle of the road just ahead. At first, I thought it was a trick of the headlights, maybe a tree or a pole, blurred by the rain, but as I got closer I realized it was a person, standing perfectly still in the downpour, wearing a white shirt and dark jeans, their face hidden in the shadow of a hood. I slammed on the brakes, the truck screeching to a halt just a few feet away from them. The cab shook with the sudden stop, and my heart raced as I stared at the figure. They didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge me at all. Just stood there in the rain like some kind of ghostly statue. I honked the horn, the sound piercing through the quiet storm. Still, no reaction. My gut told me to stay in the cab, to lock the doors and keep driving. But curiosity, or maybe stupidity, got the better of me. I rolled down the window a crack and shouted into the night, "Hey, are you okay?" No response. The figure remained motionless. The longer I looked, the more unsettling they became. There was something off about the way they stood, too rigid, too unnatural. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but before I could shift into gear, the figure moved. Just a step forward, but it was enough to send a chill down my spine. I put the truck in reverse, ready to back away, but then I heard it. A sound like nails scraping against metal. My blood ran cold as I realized it was coming from the side of the truck. I whipped my head around, but the mirrors showed nothing. No shadows, no movement, just the rain and the dark forest beyond. When I looked back at the road, the figure was closer, its head tilted unnaturally to the side, as if observing me. Something wasn't right. This wasn't a hitchhiker or someone stranded. This was something else. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I didn't care what or who it was anymore. I just needed to get out of there. I floored the gas, the truck lurching forward. The figure didn't move out of the way. For a split second, I thought I was going to hit them, but then they were gone. Just vanished into thin air, like they'd never been there at all. My heart pounded as I sped down the road, my eyes darting between the mirrors and the rain-slicked asphalt ahead. I drove for what felt like hours, the road stretching endlessly before me. The rain eased up, but the eerie silence remained. No other cars, no signs of life. Just the hum of the engine and the faint rustle of trees in the wind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Then I saw it again. The same figure standing in the middle of the road, as if waiting for me. My stomach dropped. It wasn't possible. I'd left them miles behind. Yet there they were, exactly as before. Same white shirt, same dark jeans, same hood obscuring their face. This time, I didn't stop. I gritted my teeth and kept driving, determined to plow right through if I had to. But as I approached, the figure did something I'll never forget. It lifted its head, and I saw its face, or rather, the lack of one. Its skin was pale and smooth, with no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just a blank, featureless mask. And yet I felt its gaze, cold and penetrating, as if it could see straight into my soul. I screamed, swerving to avoid it, the truck skidding dangerously close to the edge of the road. When I looked in the mirror, the figure was gone. My hands shook uncontrollably as I gripped the wheel, my mind racing. What the hell was going on? I drove faster, desperate to escape, but the road refused to end. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees looming taller, their branches clawing at the edges of the pavement. The air grew heavier, thicker, until it felt like I was driving through a tunnel. My headlights barely pierced the darkness, and the GPS was nothing but static. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost all meaning. Then, just as I was about to lose hope, I saw a faint light in the distance. A gas station, glowing like a beacon in the night. Relief washed over me as I pulled in, the truck sputtering to a stop. The station was old and run down, but I didn't care. I needed to refuel and get my bearings. As I stepped out of the cab, the cold air bit into my skin, and I realized just how quiet it was. No crickets, no wind, nothing. Just an oppressive silence. The attendant was an older man with a weathered face, sitting behind the counter. He looked up as I entered, his eyes narrowing. "Long night?" he asked, his voice gruff. I nodded, too shaken to speak. I grabbed a coffee and asked him about the road, describing everything I'd seen. His expression darkened, and he shook his head. "Son, there ain't no road like that around here," he said. "Not on any map I've ever seen." I stared at him, my heart sinking. "But I just came from there. It's real." I swear, he looked at me for a long moment, then leaned in closer. "You're lucky you made it out," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Most don't." I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to know. I paid for the coffee and fuel, got back in the truck and drove until the sun rose. By the time I reached my destination, the events of that night felt like a bad dream, but the scratches on the side of the truck told a different story. To this day, I've never found that road on any map, and I've never gone looking for it either. Some places are better left forgotten. Back in the day, my grandpa used to go to the nearby town from his village for various purposes, leaving early morning and returning by night. The town was about 15 kilometers from the village, and then the rural areas were not much electrified. Through the outskirts and the fields, it got difficult to see the path and reach village after it got dark. Being a relatively rich man, he had helped many fellow villagers. One such person was Shankar, a farmer, who owed a huge debt to my grandpa. Grandpa had lent him a large sum of money for the marriage of his only daughter, and at a time of dire need. As such, he respected and revered my grandpa with a lot of gratitude. One day, Grandpa got very, very late while coming back. He couldn't see the road and lost his way. It being the rainy season, he was finding it difficult to reach the village through the puddles. After toying with the dark for a while, Grandpa was getting very worried when a familiar voice called him from behind. It was Shankar with a lamp in his hand. Shankar immediately told Grandpa to start walking, as he used the lamp from behind to show the path. He strictly told Grandpa not to look back. Not giving it much thought, Grandpa started walking. Throughout the path he conversed with Shankar, asking how his daughter was doing and how his crops were coming around. They discussed the roads and the rains and the village, and not once did my grandpa look back. Soon they arrived at the brink of the houses. Shankar left, saying he couldn't go any further inside as he had someplace else to go. Grandpa went on by himself and kept walking until he observed an assembly of people standing, discussing something. When they told him what they were discussing about, Grandpa froze. Shankar had passed away that day. It wasn't someone who had shown him the path. It was something. Shankar had returned from death to acknowledge his debt and provide help to Grandpa when he needed it.